Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Cyrus Webb Presents. We're kicking off a brand new series today, and we're so glad that you could be here for us today. And we're doing this with Dr. Teresa A. Smith. If you guys follow her on Instagram, you know her as Dr. Teresa Smith there. We affectionately call her Dr.TAS. She has a brand new book out that's now called Transformation. This is her third full-length book. We're going to talk to Dr. TAS not only about the writing of the new book, but also what it's been like for her. Hey, Susan, hope all is well with you. What it's been like for her to share the message. And we're kicking off a 10-part series today, which I'm really excited about this book. And also we'll let you all know how you all can join the conversation here on IG or whatever platform you're joining us on. And also make sure you guys are following Dr. TAS as well. Dr. TAS, hello to you. How are you?
I'm great, Cyrus. How are you?
All right. Always great to see you. It's great to see you face to face.
Likewise.
So, look, this is exciting. Hello to you guys. Tessa, hope all is well with you. Thank you all so much for being on with us. If you all have any questions, comments, feel free to drop those if you're joining us live. If you all are catching the replay, still feel free to comment. We will be going back and going through the comments. So, Dr. Ties, you launched this month. It's hard to believe we're saying goodbye to August already. But you launched your brand new book, your third full-length book, Transformation. Before we get into this first message, what has it been like for you now to be talking about this topic at the time that we're kind of living through right now?
Cyrus, as I share my book,
Yeah.
it's amazing how is it life imitates art or art imitates life. When I was writing the book, and I'm going to be honest, I thought, well, I'm too honest. I had another title in the beginning, and the title was Change. And someone said to me, no, don't do change, because everybody's talking about change. And I said, okay, now I don't know what I'm going to call it. And when I went back and looked at my notes, I had notes on transformation. And I'm like, it's called Transformation.
Yeah.
And so now to be looking at where we are, because really I should have had the book out last year, I'm like, it's right on time.
Yeah.
It's the appointed time because we're still going through this transformation. We had all this change last year and we thought we were over it, really, as we were going into the summer months. But here we are now going back through the transformation. So for me, it just seems like this is the appropriate time for us to be delving into this topic.
Such a great thing, which is why we're so excited for those joining us on Instagram. We're kicking off a 10-week series. Now, you all will be able to watch this in other places, Dr. TAS's YouTube channel, as well as on Facebook, because we want you all to get the most impact. Hello to you, Margaret. I see you. Hello to everyone. I'm trying to give everyone a wave as we're going in. But Transformation is the title of the book, and we're going to be kicking off this 10-week series today. What Dr. TAS has done in the book is giving us 10 messages, and the first one is a good one, but a hard one. So it's good that we're kind of kicking off with that, Dr. TAS. But I want to talk about how you were kind of infused in this, because you're not just an author, you're a life coach as well. But, we always hear that the coach sometimes needs a coach. Talk to us about how this book, how Transformation, though you are now presenting it to us, how it really was for you. Talk to us about that.
Cyrus, every morning, very much like you, when I wake up, I'm given a message. And some people are like, you're given a message. I really am given a message. And those mornings where it seems like I'm struggling, it's because I haven't gotten it yet. But I'm given a message. And, with this particular book, and particularly the first one, Change is so challenging. For me as a life coach, I pour so much into other people. And when I used to hear, the therapist has got a therapist, the doctor has to have a doctor, I didn't understand that. But we are in the helping profession and we pour so much into other people that we have to find a way to pour back into ourselves. And so for me, the morning messages are they fortify me. And they help me to get through the day because it sets the tone. And then I build everything else for my day based upon the message that I give. So for me, when I talk about the messages and the lessons are for me, they are for me. And my hope is that other people can use them as a foundation as they continue to go through their daily walk.
Yeah, such a great thing. You begin message one, as you alluded to, Dr. TAS. It is change is challenging. So as we're going throughout this series, we'll be reinforcing this message. And Tessa says, oh my, I can relate. to the message. Yeah, and I think, Tessa, I think you're a great example of this too. I think all of us, we know we're given something, right? It's just up to us to be able to share that something. And a lot of times, like for me, like you mentioned, Dr. Taj, those messages from my book were for me that I'm now able to share for other people. But I think that's a great thing about being able to pour into others. You say, though, in message 1, though, and for those who have the print edition, it's on page 5, change is challenging. You say this: change requires us to accept that we are not perfect, that we've likely made some poor decisions, and our behavior may not always have been productive, and that we are ultimately responsible for our outcomes. Now, 3 things you mentioned there are not easy to admit, Dr. TAS. 1, that we have to accept that we're not perfect, that we don't always get it right. That's the first thing. 2, that we've likely made some poor decisions. And 3, our behavior may not always have been productive. So it's almost that reaping what you sow type of effect. So why did you decide that this was important in message 1 of this book, Dr. TAS, to talk about us and how a lot of times when we think about transformation, the reason why we're not changing is because of ourselves?
Cyrus, you can't do change until you look inward. And so for me, it's like giving myself permission to understand I'm not perfect. We know we're not perfect because we're human beings, so we're in the flesh, but we live in a world where we got to be perfect. I got to be perfect on my job. I got to be the perfect mate. I got to be the perfect mom, perfect sibling, whatever it is, daughter. And so we've got that in our brain, even though we know it's not possible. So if you're going to transform, if you're going to make real substantive change, you've got to first understand you're not perfect. You made some poor decisions, even though you thought they were good decisions, and your outcomes weren't really what you wanted, but that's okay. Because when you can accept that, then you can actually make real change. But if I got to still hold on to that idea, and it's a false idea of perfection, then that prevents you from actually doing the work to become the best person that you can be.
Yeah. Now, I will say this, Dr. TAS, for those who are just now learning about transformation, one of the things, we all talk from our own perspective. We talk about what we know. I do it a lot myself. I'll either use movie quotes, TV quotes, or biblical examples. In this particular message, you use the example of Samson, which when I first started reading it, I thought, how in the world does this fit? But then I started getting what you were saying. Talk to us about how when you're thinking about change, why Samson came to mind for you.
Well, in the book, and as I said in another interview, my editor was like, well, I think there are other people that you could use besides Samson if I wanted to use biblical examples. But Samson wouldn't leave me alone. Mm-hmm. And I stuck with Samson because if you think about it, Samson has everything. He's a judge. That's what his title was. He was a judge. He's got it all. He's built, he can destroy animals with his hand. He can kill people. He is the man. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger comes to mind, Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'm a movie person. They go say, oh, she can go all that. Yes. And so, he's this manly man, but he likes this woman. And we all like something. Right. He liked this woman. And so he didn't understand that this woman was being sent to try to determine why he was so strong and why they couldn't defeat him. Right. And so he fell into her trap. We all fall into traps. It doesn't have to be love traps. It's just we're not thinking right, or we're thinking based upon only the information we have at that moment, and we make a decision. Well, Samson made a decision finally after she kept pestering him, and he told her that my strength came from my hair. Well, as soon as he told her, she then let the people know how they could overcome him because his hair had never been cut. Well, his secret was told, his hair was cut, he was thrown in prison, he had no power anymore. But redemption came because he understood finally that even though he was such a powerful man, he wasn't powerful in his own right. He was powerful because God had made a covenant. And so as long as he kept the covenant, he had that strength and he was the judge. But once he broke it, he didn't have it anymore. But he repented. He repented and he asked God one more time, if you'll just give me the strength, you'll give me the strength, I'll do what I'm supposed to do. And basically God answered his plea. His hair grew back. They still making fun of him, like, oh, you're not thinking of blah, blah, blah. And then all those people were there at that party that they were going to make fun of him, which they were, and all of them perished. He killed more people with that one act than he'd killed before. So for me, Samson is about life. We think we are good in whatever way we are good in, because we got to have confidence. I believe in that too. But sometimes having confidence, sometimes I said we buy into our own cover story. Yep. Sometimes we get caught up in our own cover story and we forget we got some weaknesses too. And so because of that, it makes us susceptible and we make poor decisions. But we don't always bounce back from the poor decisions. Samson bounced back, got back on the path, made his covenant, renewed his covenant with God, and then he did what he was supposed to do. So for me, it's like, no, Samson, everybody can relate to Samson. You just got to know how to view Samson. Samson is the everyday man, everyday woman.
Yeah. Tessa says he was the man. He was in love, but Samson was human after all. You know, when you were talking just now, and hello to you, Sade, glad to see you. When you were talking just now, Dr. TAS, I thought about something else, because you were talking about believing your own cover story. And of course, social media, the platform we're using, is another one where people feel like they have to be perfect, that everything is right. And we can get into that same trap there. We can, lose ourselves, trying to please everyone or be what everyone else wants us to be. You say, though, in that message, from Samson's story, we learn our lived experiences can sometimes be the catalyst for needed change to occupy in our lives. And I think sometimes what in hearing you talk about it and actually reading it in the book, I was like, okay, yeah, sometimes we have to hit that moment where we realize, okay, there's one or two ways this can go at this point.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that for our audience here as we're kind of starting this series here. Hello to you, Depo, as well with you. As we're starting this series here, and again, for those who are joining us live, you are watching a special edition of Cyrus Represents. I'm kicking off a 10-week series. It's going to be every Sunday for the next 9 weeks after this with Dr. Teresa A. Smith, Dr. TAS, based on her book, Transformation. It's out now on Amazon. We definitely invite you guys to get your own copy of it. This book is available in print as well as the Kindle edition. We want you to get it. We want you to join us for these conversations. And it really is about something that all of us can benefit from, and that's transformation. And you mentioned something interesting, Dr. TAS, for those who may have missed it. Last year was about change. Yeah. And now here we are now having to transform. So what is your hope as people kind of think about this first message? Change is challenging. We know that we have to change, but what do you want them to know about the necessity of the challenge in doing it?
Cyrus, that's such a heavy question because many things pop in my mind immediately. Mm-hmm. It is challenging, but life is challenging. And I think sometimes, whether it's through social media or it's through the movies or the TV shows, because I'm a movie TV person, mm-hmm. I don't know if we've been conditioned to believe that everything is just going to be smooth. Yeah. And so I think what I want folks to understand is it is going to be challenging, but don't let the challenge prevent you from actually making the step. Because in order to change your circumstances, you've got to be brave enough to make the first step. No one told us it was going to be easy. I think of a song, no one told us the road was going to be easy, but he didn't bring us this far to leave us. So you've got to accept that. And I think about Christ when he came, it was challenging. Now, I understand he's God, he come down as the son, but he's in the flesh. It was challenging for him. So it's going to be challenging, but understand that's part of the process. If it wasn't challenging, are you really going through an improvement process? Because transformation is all about improvement. If there's nothing, if I'm not having to sweat when I exercise or when I'm walking, am I really burning any calories? Yeah. So it's a part of the process, and accept that or welcome it. Don't be resistant to it.
Right. And I think you bring up a really good point, because I think a lot of times when we think about these things, and you mentioned about the conditioning, I think the other side of that conditioning is we think everything's going to be wrapped up at the end of 2 hours or an hour.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
That it's going to be quick. You're going to start this thing, and then it's going to be over with.
Yeah.
but it really is a continual process, which
Mhm.
is why, for those again who are just not finding out about Dr. Taz's book, she gives us the information, but then she also puts it on you. You have what you call your Gleam recaps, and we're going to be talking about this every week. Dr. Taz, talk to us about that, because I want to read the one. It's on page 8 for message 1. Change the things in your life that negatively influence your thinking and behavior. Again, going back to Samson, we know what Samson had to do. So what would you want our audience, our viewing audience, and even those joining us via the podcast, what would you want them to know about the importance of, again, the work of being able to look at themselves, honestly look at themselves, and see what may not be serving them well?
You know, with the Gleam recap, it was my way of trying to summarize everything down to a couple of lines, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, the first message is change is challenging. So change the things in your life that negatively influence your thinking and behavior. Now, that's going to be heavy. I'm going to be honest. It's not something you're going to do in a day. You're not going to do it in a week or a month, because that means you've got to examine how you respond to everything. But I wanted to, with the gleams, boil it down to like a call to action. So you're able to focus in on what you need to think about, because there are many things that that negatively impact our thinking and behavior. It could be a word that's a trigger for you.
Mm-hmm.
And someone says that word and you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And once you go down the rabbit hole, you down that hole for a week, trying to get out, because they said something and they don't even know that it's something that triggers you, but you know it triggers you. So you have to figure out how you're now going to deal with that word being used, because you can't lose precious time every time you hear it and you go down the rabbit hole. Or it could be that they're just things, you know, sometimes we get mischievous, as an older lady said many moons ago, and I've never forgotten it. Sometimes she was mischievous. Sometimes we get mischievous. And so therefore, if you know you can get mischievous,
Mm-hmm.
is that mischievous behavior helping you or hurting you?
Yeah.
And if it's not helping you, then you got to figure out, why do I get mischievous about certain things? Because it's not like we're mischievous about everything. But whatever those certain things are, you've got to examine that. And Cyrus, I know that you're going to probably mention the reflect and connect questions. I put the questions there and I gave some basic questions / statements, but they tied back to the Gleam recap, because as you're doing the work of thinking about the action step, which is the Gleam recap, then even though the questions may not specifically address your situation, I want you to play with those questions and think about it based upon what you've been identifying, because they're there to help you begin to understand why you are behaving the way that you behave. I'm not saying your behavior is wrong.
Yeah.
Never would I say that. I'm just saying that we're trying to understand why we are who we are and how we can become the best version of who we are.
Such a great thing. And before we get into the questions, I want to go back to the Gleam recap, because I think it's an interesting correlation again to the example of Samson, which after reading it, again, it made sense about this particular thing, because the thing that really, when we look at Samson, the problem was his pride. And when you look at that Gleam recap, it says change the things in your life that negatively influence your thinking and behavior. He should have never been in that situation with Delilah. He should have never been in that situation where he was able to let his guard down, and that pride, you know, was able to show itself the way that it did. Because, you know, even in that account, you know, he would give her other answers before he actually gave her, you know, the real thing. But it was because of his pride of, you know, I'm just going to play a game. But that game proved, you know, almost deadly for him. You know, so I want to talk about that for a second, Dr. TAS, because again, this is what makes it so personal when we're reading this, because we sometimes are the reason why we are stuck. We want to blame other people. Like, he could have blamed Delilah for telling, but he would want to tell. It was his fault. So what do you want our audience to know about first accepting responsibility and the connection to accepting responsibility to us being able to be open to change?
You know, you called it pride, Cyrus. I'm going to call it ego. And I think he had an ego. And pride is good. And I can remember growing up hearing people talk about, pride and this and that. But I think he had an ego because she's not the only woman that he was, intermingling with. If
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, he had a couple of other wives. So, but he was the man, and he knew that he shouldn't cut his hair. And I don't know if the story says don't tell anyone where your strength comes from, but he knew he wasn't supposed to cut his hair.
Yeah.
So that was his way of being accountable to the Nazarite, I'm gonna call it covenant that was made. But again, I think as it relates to us, I think that it is hard for us to understand that, and I go back to that, the facade, the cover story, that when we buy our own cover story, how vulnerable that makes us.
Yeah.
Because at that point, we're susceptible to any attack, because I am not going to let these people know that I don't have it going on. I'm out here driving around, and I'm not, guys. I'm out here driving around in this, try to think of a nice car. I'm out here driving around in this 600 series or 700 series BMW. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want people to know that I really am struggling to make the car payment. Because if I let them know that, then my pride has been hurt. The image that I am showing people, they're going to know that it's some cracks in it. But when you do that, then that means I'm letting that negativity, meaning the truth, because I'm looking at it as negative, influence the decisions that I make. And so I keep burying myself further and further in a hole. And then when it's time to dig out, I've got all this dirt over me and I can't dig out. Because the question is, as you say, go left or go right. The question is, do I admit, meaning I let that car go and get a car that I can afford to drive around in? Do I do that? Or I keep trying to drive around in these expensive cars and I go from car to car, and people really probably thinking, she keeps changing cars. She changes about every couple of months. Now, what's up with that? Well, because I couldn't pay for that one, so now I done picked up another one. But that's my behavior. And that's because I, as you say, pride, I'm going to say ego, I'm going to say bought into my whatever, I can't be real. And you have to be real.
Yeah. So true. Lady T, hello to you. Glad to see you live with us, Lady T. Again, this is Dr. TAS. If you guys are not following her, I'm going to go ahead and say this, and I'm going to reiterate it again here in a bit. Make sure you guys are following her at Dr. Teresa Smith here on Instagram. Dr. Teresa Smith is where you all can find her here on Instagram. We're discussing message 1 from her book, Transformation. And this message, again, is a good one, as you can tell. Change is challenging. That is the title here. Hello to you, Kelvin, joining us from overseas. We appreciate you for being on with us. So let's talk about, as you referenced it earlier, but as we go throughout this this conversation of the next several weeks, Dr. TAS, part of this is a Gleam recap. We just went through that, but also reflect and connect. I want to talk about one of those because I think it's such an interesting thing. And again, if Samson had done this, maybe would have made a different decision, and that is, for those who have the print edition on page 9, examine the outcome of the decisions. A lot of times we get so in that bull in a china shop mentality, we just go running and we don't think about what can be the outcome, right, of what we're doing. Why is it important for us to examine the outcome as we are making changes or even approaching life?
Cyrus, I'm a former school counselor, so, we always go through the process of looking at when we're looking at what steps to make, what's the pros and cons. So for me, it's a quick process because I'm just built that way now. But you have to determine, if I do this, what are going to be the positives? What are going to be the negatives? If the positives outweigh the potential positive outcome outweigh the negative, then I still got to decide, is this something that I want to do? Because that could still be the case, but does it align to my moral compass? But let's just say the positive outweigh the negative and I go with it. All right. And things work out good. But what if the negatives outweigh the positive, but you still went with it and then you got the negative outcome? What looking at the possible outcomes of your decision does is, one, prepares you for what could happen, good or bad. And then it tests you, because if you're not secure enough in yourself to deal with the negativity that may come, then you've already set yourself up for failure. Because every time you make a decision, it's not going to be positive, even when it should line up to be positive. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes things are revealed to you that you sort of knew, but you really weren't consciously aware of, and it can be perceived at that moment as a negative, but it may become the catalyst that helps you to make the change that you need to make. But again, being aware of what the outcomes of a decision could be is so important. And I think for lots of folks, we just make decisions, and we just, well, the chips fall where they may. And sometimes the chips fall and we just can't bounce back. And so that's the reason I think that is so important. And like you said with Samson, if he thought about it, because he played with her.
Yeah.
He played with her for a while. What was this? It was that. And then he got tired of playing and he told her the truth, never thinking that once he said the truth, that was it. Yeah. And that's how he got snared.
Mm-hmm. Our mutual friend, when you mentioned ego, I thought about our mutual friend, Mary Ellen Sagana, but she talks all the time about ego, about the dangers of it. And that is the truth. And again, that's why I think it's so great that we're setting this up the way that we did. Again, talking about the challenges that can come with change. Yes, change is necessary. And I should say it's inevitable one way or the other. But if we want it to be something that we can be happy about, we have to be willing to do that work. Again, everyone, message one. We're off to a great start here. Message one from Dr. Teresa A. Smith, Dr. TAS's book, Transformation. Make sure you guys, if you came in late, this will be up on Instagram, Facebook. You'll be able to find it on Dr. TAS's YouTube channel as well. We want you all to join us back here next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central Time for message 2 of the book, message 2. And again, we want you guys to be engaged with this. And again, make sure you guys get the book, because in the book, you're able to do the work. She has space there for you guys to be able to actually add your own thoughts. You can make it interactive with yourself. Dr. TAS, let them know how to stay connected with you. I mentioned earlier about here on Instagram, but how else can they stay connected with you?
You can also follow me on Facebook, Dr. Teresa Smith, or Talk with TAS on Facebook. If you're on LinkedIn, you can also find me, Dr. Teresa Smith, aka Dr. TAS, on LinkedIn also. And I'm all over Facebook. And I think that's probably the best way for you to reach out to me.
All right.
Instagram.
That's right. So make sure you guys give her a follow here on Instagram. Follow her on the other platforms. Dr. TAS, a great kickoff to this series. Excited about this and looking forward to next week's episode.
Thank you, Cyrus. I look forward to seeing everybody next week. Thanks again, Cyrus.
And we thank you all for watching this episode of Cyrus Represents. Make sure you guys pick up Transformation, get the book, do the work, and remember what message 1 was about. Change is challenging, but keep in mind that it's also necessary. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.